Okay, I'll pay for that one later. All right, thank you. Anyway, as Al said, I've been writing about the city of Detroit for a long time, and there's so much happening right now in the city that I thought I'd just run through some slides for about 20 minutes or so and talk about what's happening both in the greater downtown and in the neighborhoods, and then use that to suggest a few areas that we can think about. So why don't we do the first slide? And what you see, the most obvious thing happening is this incredible surge in construction and new development and revitalization in the greater downtown, particularly with housing. No one was building housing in Detroit for many, many years of any kind. And now we're seeing this incredible surge in new construction, both the conversion of older buildings and also the ground up construction of new buildings. So this one is on the east side in the Lafayette Park District. It's called Ducharme Place. Ducharme is a little side street there. And this is just one of, not even quite sure how many, depending on what you count, but 15 or 20 of these projects going up all over the greater downtown. Probably about 1,000 units, new apartments right now under construction, and another couple thousand or more in planning that will start construction soon, this year and next year certainly. So sometime in the next 5 years, we'll be adding 3,000 to 5,000 new apartments, which would translate into 3,000 to 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 new residents just in that greater downtown, midtown area. Why don't you cycle through a couple slides there? That's what it'll look like when it's done. Next one. This is an older building that was converted recently into new housing. There's a lot of this kind of thing happening too. This was a very dilapidated building in Midtown, 711 Alexandrine, in which the top floor was not usable because the roof leaked and there were bed bugs and rats, but they did house people who could not afford anything else, $400 a month for an apartment. And those people were relocated with the help of the developer and subsidies from Midtown and JP Morgan Chase and a lot of people. So some of this is happening where people are being displaced, but so far the displacement has been fairly minor, and the people have been relocated with assistance. Obviously, the issue of gentrification is a real hot issue in Detroit, although so far there hasn't been a lot of actual displacement. There's been a lot of fear of displacement, but we may see more of it in the future, and that's I think what the issue is, that there's something like 2,000 units of what's called HUD Section 8 housing for seniors in the immediate downtown, midtown, where the contracts expire over the next several years. So that's going to be a real issue. What happens to the seniors who are living here, who are living only on Social Security and don't have any other options? What happens to those people? They have a lot of rights under the law, state and federal law, about how they get relocated and what kind of aid they're supposed to get. But still, it's going to be a big issue, and it's obviously traumatic when people do get displaced. This, though, was one of the more successful ones. Why don't you go to the next slide, please? On the left, you see Mayor Duggan. The man in the middle is Jamie Dimon. He's CEO of JP Morgan Chase. And Sue Mosey, the woman on the right, who, as we refer to her as the mayor of Midtown. She's headed the group Midtown Detroit, Inc. for the last 30 years and has done just an incredible job. One of the most successful nonprofit civic group leaders, certainly in Detroit and almost anywhere. The stuff that she's been able to accomplish in Midtown is really pretty remarkable. Why don't you go ahead? This is one of Sue's projects. It's called the Strathmore. It's an old hotel from the 1920s that has been vacant for many years. It's about to reopen as affordable housing. What we call affordable refers to a level of income that is about 80% of the metro-wide median income. So this is not working class or poor people or subsidized housing, but it's for people sort of the lower, maybe the upper working class or lower middle class or people starting out or something like that. You still need, let's say 25 to 30,000 a year to live here. So this is not going to be where the lawyers and bankers live, but you could have students, you could have service people, that kind of stuff. But this is an example of the kind of project that's being done a lot. Why don't you go ahead? This one, of course, is right on the East Riverfront. It's called Orleans Place. Now, this is going to initially be about 270 units of various sizes and various price points, rental housing at this point. Interestingly, projects like this take a long time to get to the point of groundbreaking. This probably took 5 years to get to the point where they could break ground and start construction. Endless sort of delays with financing, with environmental problems with the land, recovering from the Great Recession. I mean, endless sort of red tape to get to this point. But once they do get to groundbreaking, it goes up pretty fast. And so this thing has gone up like mushrooms just in the last few months, and it should open, if not late this year, then early next year. And eventually you'll see, several hundred people living here. This project and others, the city requires them to set aside about 20% of their units as affordable. And again, what is affordable is sometimes a question. Again, this is not for the senior citizens who can't afford more than $400 or $500 a month. This is more sort of working class, getting into the lower middle class price range. But they are making an effort to include a range of people, so it doesn't all just get priced up. Why don't you go ahead? This is what it'll look like when they get done. Notice very walkable, low rise, a mix of residential and retail. They're really trying to create neighborhoods and not just a development here. This is not sort of gated communities like a lot of cities have, and which Detroit did build back in the 80s with Harbortown and so on, where you had a gated community with high-priced condos. They're definitely trying to build walkable neighborhoods with a lot of attractions, a lot of retail, and all the new projects being done are being done on sort of this model right now. Why don't you go ahead? Now this is one of the really high-priced ones. This is on Woodward Avenue. It's known as the Scott. This is, and I don't know what their allocation for affordable is, but the high-priced units, the ones on the corner, on the upper floors, are going to go for $3,000 a month. 3-bedroom, large units. So prices have been bid up very quickly in and around the downtown. The rental rates range from, used to be about $1 to $1.25 per square foot. So again, you could get units, a small studio for $400 or $500 a month. Now they're about $2 a square foot. So even the small ones, go for $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 a month. And the supply is not meeting demand. There's so many young people, mostly young, sort of working, university educated, working for Dan Gilbert or somebody like that, moving downtown, that there's really a shortage of supply at this point, hence the construction boom. Go ahead. And this, of course, is the Book Cadillac Hotel on the left, and on the right is a parking garage, and the construction on top is some high-end high-end rental apartments that are going in on top of the garage. This was a project that was planned before the Great Recession and the crash. It was supposed to be high-end condominiums, and then that fell apart because of the crash. They had ordered the steel. They had to send all the steel back. The project was dead. But the developers stuck with it. They're Detroit-based, Detroit-located developers, and they came back. And now it's going in as relatively high-end apartments on top of this. So again, new things happening all over the place. And one more, please. Next one. And this is Dan Gilbert's latest thing in Brush Park that we wrote about Sunday in the paper. This is going to be 400 new units, 100 for sale, 300 for rent, 20% affordable units, most of which are in a senior building, senior citizen building, but very modern architecture, a lot of rooftop terraces, a lot of greenways, and some retail. So again, they're making, and the city is part of this, making a very conscious effort to do neighborhoods and not just gated communities. So this is something that's supposed to drop into the Brush Park district north of downtown and become a real neighborhood where people can age in place. They have cheaper apartments for young folks, then they have for sale units that they can buy as they start to have a family, and then they have a senior building where they can retire into. So whether anybody actually does that cycle over 30 or 40 years, we'll see, but that's the idea. All right, go ahead. And of course, a lot of what's happening downtown is because of this man, Dan Gilbert, founder of Quicken Loans, supposedly worth about $5 billion, according to Forbes magazine latest estimate. Those estimates are pretty bogus, I think, but he's obviously worth a lot of money. owns 90 buildings in downtown Detroit. His Quicken Loans is the second or third largest mortgage lender in the country. He owns the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team, which I guess just won the other night, right? So they're a game behind in the NBA playoffs. But he owns several casinos: Greektown Casino, two casinos in Cleveland and Cincinnati and in Atlantic City. He's bidding for Yahoo, the internet service. So he's obviously one of the wealthiest men in America, and he has really done an amazing job in Detroit in just 5 years. He moved downtown in 2010 from the suburbs. He brought 1,400 people with him. Now he's got about 12,000 working downtown. So downtown is completely filled up with these educated young folks. And it's sort of amazing if you spend a lot of time in downtown Detroit to walk around the heart of downtown now and see all these young folks, going to work in T-shirts and jeans and tattoos and everything. The whole millennial scene is really sort of interesting and different than what it has been. Pardon me. There's the controversy. Of course, Dan has a very elaborate security system for his buildings. He's got cameras everywhere, and that's created a lot of controversy. They think it's sort of Big Brotherish that his cameras are watching all of us all the time. I think we're all on camera all the time anyway in public now. There's cameras everywhere, and I don't think we should be surprised at that. He's got a privately held business. It's not a public corporation like Ford or GM, so we don't know the financials of his company. We don't know really how well he's doing, although obviously he's making lots and lots and lots of money. So there are some issues, and should one guy control as much as Dan Gilbert does? I mean, that's an issue that's raised a lot. But I don't think you can say it's been anything but positive and even just remarkable about how much has happened so fast. Go ahead. One thing he's doing, he's trying to bring in a lot of high-end retail downtown to sort of recreate the retail scene that was in Detroit for so many years and began to disappear about 30 years ago when Hudson's closed. This is John Varvatos. It's a very high-end men's store from New York. The man, John Varvatos, is from Detroit originally, has this very high-end men's store in New York. This is where you pay, whatever, $150 for a T-shirt, that sort of stuff. But Gilbert is not going for just the Dunkin' Donuts and the McDonald's downtown. He wants these sort of unique sort of destination-style retail places, like, for example, Shinola, which is not his, but Shinola and some of the others. Nike recently opened a store, one of its stores downtown. And so retail is returning, especially sort of the entertainment-style retail, the bars, the coffee shops, the nightclubs, the high-end restaurants. A lot of amazing high-end restaurants have opened. Go ahead. And he's also doing a lot of really unusual public special events, like this was a charity event to rappel down the side of one of his office buildings, the First National building. And so you pay $1,000 and you get to do this. I did not do it myself, and not just because it cost $1,000, but when I saw this, and that of course is Gilbert himself, and I asked him, I said, did you tell your wife and your insurance company you were doing this? So I don't know. It's the kind of thing he does. Go ahead. Big question about big effort to replace the Ambassador Bridge with the new bridge, the new Gordie Howe International Bridge, which will break ground probably not for about another year. It's still in early construction stages, but and so people wonder if it's ever going to happen, but it takes a long time. But why don't you go ahead? This is an image of what the new one might look like. This is known as a suspension bridge, the kind Ambassador Bridge is. And the next slide, please. This is a cable-stayed bridge, which is the more modern way to build these, and they haven't decided yet which way they're going to go. My guess it'll probably be this way. There are certain advantages to building it this way. These towers will be as tall as the Renaissance Center. So this will be, if they build it this way, this will be a major presence on the skyline and really become one of those landmarks in Detroit. Right now they're down to 3 finalists as a team to build it, and they're going to put out the RFP, request for proposals from these 3 companies. They'll pick one by the end of the year, or possibly in early 2017, early next year. And then they'll start construction probably sometime next year, mid to late next year. and they hope to open by 2020 or 2021. So it's still a ways off, but it does seem to be actually happening. Go ahead, please. And of course, the arena, if you've been downtown at all, you know that this arena is under construction. It's supposed to open in a little over a year, and it's pretty remarkable. Why don't you, next slide, please. This is from about a month and a half ago. It's even further ahead now. The roof is mostly enclosed at this point. And if you go ahead, you'll see that they're building all kinds of stuff around it: office space, housing, parking decks, hotels, and various kinds of things. And one of the big selling points for this project is that, of course, we're paying for a lot of it. We're paying for roughly half of it through our taxes. and the payback is that Ilitch would pay, the Ilitch's family would pay for all this other stuff around it, that they would generate all this other new development, hundreds of new apartments and retail and so on. Excuse me. Go ahead. And this is Wayne State's new business school. Wayne State University is moving their business school down to this site. So this will be just north of the arena. And again, this is part of the sort of the spin-off development that this project is supposed to bring. Go ahead, please. Now, so much for the for downtown. We hear a lot in Detroit about downtown versus the neighborhoods, and that, you know, everything's happening downtown, nothing's happening in the neighborhoods. Well, there is a real, you know, difference, but there are things happening in the neighborhoods, and one of which is the blight removal effort from the city of Detroit. So under Mayor Duggan, he has really revitalized blight removal. We've torn down, under his watch, we've torn down something like about 6,000 of these blighted, burned out houses. And over the next 2 years, he expects to tear down another 10,000 or so. So we're making a real dent on this. Now, we started out with 80,000 blighted buildings, blighted and abandoned buildings in Detroit, 80,000 buildings, and somewhere around 80 or 100,000 vacant lots in addition. So at least a third of the city, there's close to 400,000 parcels in the city. Thank you. So at least a third of the city by parcel is either vacant and abandoned. So it's a huge, huge problem. And obviously is one of the things that's held Detroit back for so many decades. But they're beginning to make a real dent in it through the blight removal. Go ahead. This is the cover of their Dan Gilbert led a task force to identify which properties are blighted and what needed to be done and how you might find the money for it. Go ahead. Street lights are coming back on. You may have heard that for years Detroit had a problem with street lights. Probably at any given night, about 40% of the street lights were off in the city of Detroit for years. So Jane and I live on East Jefferson, you know, one of the main streets on the east side, and our lights would be off for months at a time. But during the bankruptcy, they reorganized into a public lighting authority that has got it out of the city proper and into a public authority, which is one of the solutions that's worked very well for Detroit in the last 15 years, to create a whole series of sort of public authorities, conservancies, and nonprofit corporations to pick off pieces of the task, to build the Riverwalk, or to run Eastern Market, or to do the Workforce Development Agency, or to run the Historical Society. All these things have been spun off into their own, you know, nonprofit corporation public authority. And they did that with the public lighting system, and it's worked very well. So most of the street lights are now back on in the city of Detroit. Next, please. And here's something that, you know, we can do individually. I mean, some of these things, like creating a public lighting authority, you need the cooperation of the state, city, county, federal government sometimes. But things like this individual beautification of lots, we can do on our own. And in fact, people have done this all over Detroit. This is one out in Brightmoor. Some neighbors got together and created what they call a little butterfly garden, a little walking path, and some flowers and so on. And you know, there are neighborhood groups, block clubs doing this kind of thing all over the city. It can cost anywhere from nothing, just some sweat equity and some volunteers, to, you know, small amounts of money, $5,000, $10,000, some of which is available from foundations. Foundations are giving a lot of money to block clubs and what the CDCs, community development corporations, and faith-based organizations. to do this kind of work. Go ahead. And this is the Hans tree planting, the Hans Farms, Hans tree planting operation. Hans is a businessman who lives in the city and told the city he would like to buy a lot of its vacant land and create an urban farm. And it was very controversial, as you probably know. But they eventually sold him about 140 acres, about 2,000 vacant lots, and allowed him to plant trees. And so over the last 2.5 years, he's planted something on the order of 20 to 25,000 trees in the city. By perspective, Greening of Detroit, the Greening of Detroit Tree Planting Organization, typically would plant 3,000 to 5,000 trees a year, and Hans has done close to 25,000 just in 2.5 years. And here's all the volunteers who came out for planting day. So it's really pretty remarkable. So this is one of the things that you see a lot of. I mean, a whole range of interesting stuff. Why don't we go ahead? And urban farming, of course, is really enormously popular in Detroit, and it's one of the things Detroit is known for around the world. It's urban agriculture. All cities have, I've seen people grow food inside cities for a long time, during the Great Depression and during World War II, the Victory Gardens. But Detroit, beginning about 1990, really became known internationally for its urban gardens. This one is Earthworks Farm. This is the one that the Capuchin friars run, the Capuchin Soup Kitchen on the east side of Detroit. Probably one of the best run urban farms in the United States. People come from all over the world to see how they do it here. And this is where they grow the food that goes into the soup kitchen that the Capuchins run year-round. And it's also where they grow a lot of the seedlings and things that they give to other farmers from other parts of the city who come here for education. Go ahead. Here's another one. This is up in Brightmoor. Very typical. You see they're growing the food in boxes, raised beds, because the soil has been compromised in a lot of Detroit neighborhoods. So they build these boxes and import fresh dirt and then grow the crops in there. Go ahead. And this is an interesting one. These are Greening of Detroit workers, and they're sowing worms in this vacant lot over on the east side, worms, because they will kind of aerate the soil. And this is an experiment to see if this makes the soil both more suitable for growing, but also to get rid of standing water. We have a huge problem with standing water in Detroit, all over Belle Isle, and in our streets and in a lot of neighborhoods, because Detroit's very flat, and also because the ground is very clayey just below the surface, and so water doesn't have anywhere to go. And so there's a lot of experiments to drain water off parking lots and off streets into rainwater gardens, and experiments like this to find ways to get the water to percolate down into the soil, so the soil dries out. So a lot of things like this. Go ahead. And indoor agriculture is happening a lot. This again is out in the Brightmoor neighborhood. This is an old warehouse factory type facility, and this gentleman just in the last year started this indoor farm where you have these racks set up, and you grow vegetables with indoor lighting and indoor watering, and you can now buy this stuff from Artesian Farms in Whole Foods downtown and in Eastern Market and probably in some of the restaurants around town. I think that's my last slide for now. Is there anything? Okay, so let me just, now that we've had a brief look at what's happening, let me just talk about some of the issues. I mean, obviously one big issue is, who benefits from this amazing resurgence that we're seeing in Detroit? And there really is a resurgence. More has happened in the last 5 to 7 years in Detroit than happened in the 25 years before that. But the question is who's benefiting? Obviously, the downtown property owners, who either the new ones like Dan Gilbert or the ones who hung on to their buildings for a long time are seeing these great increases in property values. Condominiums in the Brush Park district that were built 10 years ago are now selling for, that 4 years ago sold for $100,000, $80,000 or $100,000 now go for $300,000. I mean, huge increases in property values. But who's it benefiting? Is it just a handful of folks, middle-class folks in the downtown area, or is it going to be the city at large? Now, the notion that it's all downtown and nothing in the neighborhoods, as I said, I think is is false. I think there are a lot of good things happening in the neighborhoods. But there is a question that a lot of the benefits have been concentrated downtown so far. And so we need to think about how to do that. The school situation remains a crisis. As Mayor Duggan said up on Mackinac a week or so ago, it doesn't matter what we do on the riverfront. It doesn't matter what we do anywhere else if we don't fix the schools. And so that is a major issue that we're still facing. Crime and gun violence is obviously a major issue. Economic development, that is creating jobs in the neighborhood, is a major issue. Senior housing is a major issue. So what can we do? Well, there's some things, as I said, that you can't do unless you're the governor or the mayor or in federal government. The city's blight removal effort is being paid for largely by the federal government through a program known as the Hardest Hit Funds. We've gotten well over $150 million from the feds to tear down vacant homes. So none of us have the power to affect that unless you're, senator, somebody or other. But things like, job programs, urban farms, senior housing, urban agriculture. I mean, there's a lot of things individuals can do. Individuals and small groups of people and faith-based groups can do stuff like that. So I think that the opportunity is there to always make a difference. I mean, there's no one who is powerless. There is no one who cannot not help, and there's no issue that cannot be improved without, not be improved by some attention and some work from people. So with that, I'm just happy to answer any questions or hear thoughts or whatever, whatever. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
These new projects that are condominiums and brush gardens, how many of those are actually paying full taxes, and how many of them have some type of major rebate?
Yeah. Well, traditionally, everything that got built, the question was how many of the new units are paying full taxes to the city. Traditionally, everything that got built got some kind of incentive, some tax incentive, because the market was so bad for so long that you had to incentivize developers to do that. Excuse me. And in fact, most of these deals are still financed at least 50% by some kind of what I call funny money deal, tax credits and conservation easements, weird financial tools that they use. Gilbert mostly does it on his own. That's interesting. But even there, the city gives him the land for free, so he'll build it. As I said, the arena got built 50% with tax money and 50% of Illich's own money. So a lot of the condominiums and so on will not pay a full 100% tax rate for a while. And how much they pay and for how long depends on what kind of deal they got. Those are slowly going away, those incentives, as the market improves, and they don't need them as much. But still, most deals get some kind of incentive. So, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Could you comment please about the controversy that we have over the jail site? Mm-hmm.
Sure. The jail site, what do we do? Obviously, it was a fiasco from the beginning. Well over $100 million cost overrun. Now, I don't know, whose fault it was. I mean, they'll work through that. At this point, the question is, what's it going to cost to build a new jail and criminal justice system? Is it cheaper where it is? To start it over right there. Is it cheaper to move it to Mountain Road? Probably not. It's probably cheaper to do it where it is, as expensive as that is. But are there other reasons to move it? Because that's not a very good site in terms of downtown revitalization to have a jail. I've always thought that was a terrible site for a jail. I'd much rather see it moved. But where you move it and who pays for it? The public pays for it, obviously. And it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars some way that'll be on taxes for Wayne County residents. So I don't see any good answer to that, but I think that it does make sense to move it just because that's a major entrance to downtown and Gratiot, and it'd be better if it's something else than besides a jail. So, yes, okay.
I'd like to ask,
yes, please.
is there any word on what's going to happen to the King homes that are on Lafayette?
No, it's interesting. I hear that question a lot, and the rumor is usually Dan Gilbert's trying to buy it, and I don't think Dan Gilbert's trying to buy it. But evidently, just based on the amount of questions and rumors, my guess is that it's being shopped around to somebody. But what happens to it? Who buys it? Does somebody want to buy it and go upscale? You know, replace everybody? I don't know. But there are a lot of questions, a lot of rumors about those homes.
But no word,
I'm sorry?
but no definitive word on exactly what's going to be happening.
No, I don't know. I don't know. No, all I'm hearing are questions and rumors at this point. Yes?
We just unveiled the master plan for the regional transit authority,
Right.
and I wondered if you had any thoughts or comments about
Yep. Yeah, on the Regional Transit Authority. Well, I think Detroit badly needs regional transit. We're the only major city in the country that doesn't have it. And a lot of cities like Denver and Houston have added these light rail systems in recent years, and I think they've done a lot of good. They lead to a lot of new development. And in Detroit, it's really critical that working class service people who live in the city get to their jobs. And it is really awful what has to happen. Last year, we wrote at the paper, we wrote about the walking man, the man who walked 18 miles a day. That's an extreme case, but it's not at all unusual that people will spend 2 or 3 hours a day on this dysfunctional bus system that we have trying to get to and from work. So I think anything that improves that system is really a matter of not just convenience, but of economic development and really of social justice. There's a great quote from the former mayor of Turin, Italy, in a documentary that I was part of, where they added all kinds of mobility. And he said, in any city, mobility is a civic right. If you live in a city, you have a right to get around, the right to get to your job. And so I would support the regional transit vote in November, and I think that'll help a lot. So. Yes, what else? Mm-hmm.
What's your take on the current status of the school, DPS, Detroit Public School?
Well, I think that the position that Mayor Duggan and the Detroit delegation took was the right one, that you need to not just bail out the debt of the Detroit Public Schools, but you need to have some school board, basically. They were calling it the Detroit Educational Commission, that can oversee where schools are built and what schools open and close. Because right now, what you have is a charter system that's come in and trying to pick off the best locations and the best students, regardless of what impact it has on Detroit Public Schools. And some of the charters are great, some of them are bad. Some Detroit Public Schools are great, some are bad. But I think you need this central school board type body that would have some control over, what's opening and what's closing. And the recent legislation that the governor is signing does not do that. It bails out financially, but there's no sense that it's going to address any of the basic problems. So, only about half the kids in the city go to public school now. The rest go to charters and academies of various kinds. So it's a big problem, but I don't think the legislation that just passed addresses it. Okay. If not, I think that you're now breaking into groups, or, I'm sorry, you're giving me smoke signals here. What am I? What?
Questions?
Oh.
For us to discuss?
Oh, okay, sure. Sure, thank you. Some questions for you to discuss. Well, I think the question, what can any of us do in Detroit? Now, you can obviously live there, you can shop there, you can volunteer. There's a million ways to volunteer. You can do urban gardens, you can help seniors. There's a lot of things, but one question, what can you do? And what can your churches do? What can your organizations do? That's one. And the other big question in Detroit is, the regional relationship between the city and suburbs. It's one thing, if you live in the city and you have a church in the city, you work right there. I mean, you plow your own garden, right? And if you're from the suburbs, maybe it's a different answer. So what do you do? So I would ask about that. I also think we also have to, Sheila Cockrell, the former city councilwoman, said the other day that, race and race relations is the 900-pound unspoken thing in any discussion between city and the suburbs. So I think we need to still talk about racial justice in the city. We're coming up on Detroit 1967, the 50th anniversary of the uprising in the city. And what's the legacy of that? And one, maybe you can talk just, how are you going to think about that over the next year, year and a half? There's going to be a million discussions and seminars and articles about that. How should we deal with that? You know, some people say we haven't made any progress at all. Well, that's clearly not true, but we still need more to go, right? So what do we do about that? You know, how do we relate to our political system? Are we happy with, you know, the way our political system is run, and does it address the problems it needs to address or not? So any of those kind of issues are fair game, I would think. Okay? Okay, well, thank you very much.